Welcome to The Blue with Joe Garatano and Steve Taylor, a semi-regular podcast brought to you from Press Express Studio B. Join us in exploring, discussing, and kvetching about all things Wildwood.
Welcome everyone to another episode of The Blue. And joining Steve Taylor and I'm Joe Garatano here, and we're going to have a special guest in this episode, Dawn Chapman. And you may have known her from her story and a documentary that was broadcast about back in 2017, so just about 3 years ago. She is part of the Just Moms STL group, and this is a story of the Westlake Landfill. And so we are so privileged and really honored to have Dawn here with us today to be able to dedicate some time here to talk with us because I am so dying to ask you so many questions after watching the documentary. And it's just a great honor to meet you here virtually in person because you are really leading that fight. You and many others, I'm sure, with you there, trying to do what's right for your community, for your families and all the loved ones that are there. So welcome to our episode of The Blue, Dawn, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you here. So for folks, again, as I mentioned when I first started here, Dawn was featured in this documentary called Atomic Homefront. And it is the story of the landfill over in Bridgeton, which has radioactive waste. So, Dawn, thanks again for joining us, and tell us a little bit about how you kind of got involved in all of this. How did this just show up on your radar, I guess, years ago that made you get involved and help to lead the fight to try to do some right there in the community?
Completely by accident. I mean, I woke up one day and we had been in my neighborhood, which is about 1.5 miles, 2 miles from Westlake Landfill. We've been having these weird odors and they had come and gone, and everybody, kind of all the moms, at the bus stop, we all took turns, okay, whose turn is it to call to figure out what the heck's going on today? And everybody looked over at me, and I'm actually an introvert. So I kind of just was like, oh, man, why do I got to do this? You guys know I don't do well with this. And they're like, oh, it's easy. You just call City Hall. And for whatever reason, I guess City Hall had gotten tired. Maryland Heights City Hall had gotten tired of people calling about the odor. So I got this very kind lady who was like, okay, so it's not our problem. You're going to have to call the state of Missouri Department of Natural Resources. And she gave me this number. And I just kind of was like, when I got off the phone and I looked down at this number, there was just a part of me that it was kind of dread. I thought, what could be going on that the municipality would deflect and send me here? And so right off the bat, I had a very weird, eerie feeling about it. And I called, and after getting transferred, I left a voicemail for somebody in the solid waste division. And it wasn't but 15 minutes later that the phone rang. And I'll tell you, I thought I would have like a 15-minute conversation and then be done. He kept me on the phone for like 2.5 hours. I mean, and I describe it as I couldn't get off the phone with him. Like, he really...
You found the right person, it sounds like.
I did, and it was bizarre. And I remember it was because, I had little kids. It was nap time. So I was sitting on the side of the bunk, patting one, as I'm talking to him, trying to take notes. And I'm like, the whole time it just kept getting worse and worse. Okay, there's a landfill on fire. Okay, but it's not burning garbage. It's burning hazardous waste. Oh, wait, next to it is radioactive waste. Well, actually, not really next to it. It's actually the same hole in the ground. And I just kept thinking, this is... the one thing I said to him, I tried to listen and take notes. I finally said, if this were really happening, why is this not in the news? Why am I not getting a knock on my front door? And he said, man, I wish it were, and I wish they would. And at that point, I got off the phone with him and I called my husband. I had to have a check, and I was like, and both of us just, I think you think that things like this don't happen, right? Like you mentioned, living down from Strucker. Like, no, certainly no one's going to let you live within 2 miles of that without telling you, right? Like, no, nobody is going to let me buy a house 2 miles from a landfill. It has, weapons waste sitting on the surface. Nobody would do that. You just start thinking that and you're like, but that doesn't happen. Somebody's got their wires crossed. So after doing some research, he sent me a bunch of stuff. And I called, he had me call the Environmental Protection Agency too. And at the end of that day, I remember after we had put the kids to bed, my husband and I just sat there going through these emails and these documents. And both of us just had tears streaming because I thought, what did we do? What did we move our family next to? What have we been living next to this entire time? So.
Wow. So that was kind of like a real kind of awakening for you. And was that something that you kind of rushed back that next morning to talk with the moms and say, here's what I found out? Or was that kind of a shock to the group as you were sharing what you had learned?
It was. And then it turns out this gentleman I talked to at DNR, I guess the media had called and
Mhm.
he actually sent them to me. So when the media called me, they let me know. They said, hey, there's another mom like around the corner from you that started a Facebook page. And so I reached out to Karen Nickel. We were neighbors this whole time and didn't even know it. And I think, yeah, I think that was the beginning of Just Moms. That was the beginning of a group of moms like putting their kids on the school bus and whatnot. And then, you got 30 minutes to talk and being like, what is happening? What is this? And we were trading documents. I'm like, I got this document today. They're like, oh, well, somebody sent me, that's when we started compiling everything. And that's when I think all of us just looked at each other and were like, okay, this is real. This is
And,
happening.
and no one had any expertise in this. This is just people that just one day, all of a sudden, you're all finding out this information, and all of a sudden, you're having to learn and become kind of an expert at what you're having to deal with there, huh?
Yeah. And I remember I called the fire department because obviously there was a fire at the site and they knew about the fire, but not a lot about the radioactive waste. And when
Mm.
the assistant fire chief who you saw on Atomic Homefront,
Yeah.
we're great friends now. We're almost family members. It didn't start out like that. He told me on the phone, he said, Dawn, he's like, the fire is serious. He's like, but if it were really this bad, he's like, I'm the fire chief. I am the head of hazmat of St. Louis County. He's like, they would have notified me. And I'm like, look, and Dr. Lisa had sent me documents. I'm like, I have documents sitting here. And he's like, well, I'm going to need to see him. And I'm like, stay there. I'm going to be there in 2 minutes. So I did. I packed up all my kids and we went down the street and I just walked in and put him on his desk. And I remember sitting there. I mean, my kids were tearing up his office and he just was changing colors. As he's
Wow.
flipping through these documents, you could like everything that I felt on that day sitting on the bunk bed reading that, I could see literally happen to him. Like as he's flipping through, you can see and it was really actually sad and emotional because there was a part of me that's like, I'm forever rocking this guy's world, right? Like this is so profound what's been allowed to happen here that once you see that it's really happened, like I mean, it bursts your little snow globe of a world, right? Your worldview
Wow.
just shatters how everything's
Oh, I bet.
supposed to
I
work.
bet. I bet. So, and I want to get to the part where I guess the documentary came into the picture of this because I'm imagining at this point that's not even on the radar. I mean, this is just you all trying to discover everything that's going on over there. But in watching the documentary, which I learned a lot, I learned about this isolation barrier
Oh
that they
yeah.
talked about, and how I think it was like one of the last meetings in the documentary. It was like August 2016 at that like community dialogue meeting. I'm not sure who the speaker was, but he said the fire was now 700 feet from the radioactive waste, which kind of you could see the reaction in the audience. Everybody thought, I think, must have thought it was a lot more, and then all of a sudden 700 feet. So that I could see the emotions running. I mean, really throughout the whole documentary there. But what is currently where is it now? What's the status of it? Have they? I mean, that was in 2017, so now we're in 2020. What's been going on as far as the latest?
So it is still about 700 to 500 feet. And I think the scariest part about it is, so that is the known radioactive waste. There is a whole middle area that's even closer to the radioactive waste that that the Environmental Protection Agency has never checked. So we don't know between the middle of the landfill and the very tip of radioactive waste, there's this whole, that 500 feet, there's never been any testing for radioactive waste in that area. So we don't even have a solid number on that. So I think at that meeting, and Steve and Dr. Lisa were part of this too for a while, because it was like, you were looking at maps, right? And you were looking at temperature probes that they had in the ground. And we were measuring, we were doing Google Earth, and we would sit down with EPA and be like, okay, so that says 700 feet, right? Like, so here's the fire, here's where the state says the fire is, and here's your tip. This is your area where you say the southernmost point of the radioactive waste is. Are we measuring this wrong? They would never commit to that number. And so we committed to a number. We're like, look, it looks like it's 700 feet. Doesn't look like it's, 2,400 feet. And at that meeting, that was the first time we got EPA to say a number. That was the actual head engineer of the site over the radioactive waste, Brad Van. And when he said that, we knew it because we were measuring it, but it still was like a punch right to the gut. I mean, you could kind of hear everybody, like all the air just went out, It was just a gas.
And that was a full meeting. That was packed. I remember in the documentary, I think even you had commented like this place is going to get filled up with people there. What was it like? I remember the part where Lois Gibbs comes into the documentary, and I didn't know as much who she was, I guess, until I learned more about Love Canal. And so it seemed like you had now an ally, somebody who had been through a similar fight. And she was in Washington with you all. I saw that part of the documentary there, and I really felt for you guys because you all went there, and it just seemed like no one would give you the time or wanted to listen. And after flying out and trying to go to the head of the EPA, or I think there were several other offices. It just was a struggle, but I would love to hear, like, how was Lois Gibbs, involvement? Did she help with?
Lois, the best story I can give, I know you see that in the film. The best story I can give with Lois is when we finally heard we were going to meet with Gina. We went to the White House. We went to the White House Council on Environmental Equality. We were invited to come and present. And I think when the head of EPA found out that was happening, they went, oh, crap. Because as we were on the plane to DC, when we landed, we had several missed phone calls from DC EPA. And they were working on our background checks. So they were like, hey, do you have time to step in and meet with the administrator? And we both looked at each other and we're like, all right, this is happening. But we hadn't prepared for that. And we did not have money. We had enough money for plane tickets and literally like granola bars. And so Lois let us stay at her house. And so we went and crashed in her basement. And the night before, because again, we didn't even know we were meeting with the administrator. We had less than, 12 hours preparation time to get our stuff together. We were both in our pajamas, and then Lois was in her pajamas sitting in her front room. And she's like, all right, we got to do this. And we role played for like 4 or 5 hours, and she pretended to be Gina McCarthy. And I'm not kidding. It was like being in a deposition. She was ruthless. She just threw stuff at us, and watching us react, and we would go back and redo it over and over. I mean, she deliberately wanted to get us used to being made to feel uncomfortable and make us squirm so that we knew what it was going to feel like, because she knew. She had been in our position, and she said, they are going to put you in the most intimidating room they have in that building. She said, I know it. This is what they do. And so, I at one point, Karen and I were close to tears, because it was like, going back and forth with her, it really did feel like, we were role playing with EPA. And we didn't go to bed until she felt comfortable and we felt comfortable. We got up the next morning. She made us breakfast. We didn't want to eat. She's like, you have to eat. I'm making you breakfast. Here, you eat this. I mean, it's like, yes, Mom. Okay. And then we went off. And I'm not kidding. I don't know what we would have done without that, because she was right. They put us in the postmaster's office, which is like a castle with floor to ceiling. I mean, and we weren't allowed to bring anybody. It was just Karen and I, but she brought 2 lawyers with her, so I mean, the deck was stacked. And yeah, we went in, and I mean, we really, I think I'm most proud of us for that moment. And I think it shocked her too. I think Gina, because we just sat there and held our own and went toe to toe with her. And I wouldn't say that we left feeling like we'd accomplished anything, but I think we left leaving them with the whole, we're not going away. We know our stuff, and we're right. We know we're right. And we're right. So that kind of changed everything going forward.
Yeah, wow, that is something. That's perspective I guess you really don't see when you watch the documentary. Steve, you spent a lot of time in Washington. I bet you're probably thinking like, yeah, I've heard of those stories, I guess, huh?
Well, well, I mean, it's typical for agencies to do that, but I also had experience as a citizen, with Times Beach and Times Beach waste, and I think I could relate a little bit more with that, being on that side of it. And throughout this process, I think you mentioned Dr. Lisa, who's my wife, who it's Dr. Lisa Martino-Taylor. I know that she's watched what you've done, and maybe helped a little bit with some data in the beginning. But both her and I have watched you, Dawn, and Karen, and others do something that is very difficult, which is to keep pressure on for years. It is hard to advocate for oneself and one's community. I mean, they have the attorneys, they have the PhDs, the administration, the administrators, and they kind of count on people losing steam. So it's easy to be intimidated, and I've just been watching this, and I've been very impressed with what you've done, and it was very kind of you to invite my wife and myself to the premiere of that movie at the in Delmar, I think it wasn't it the Tivoli?
Yeah.
Oh, that was. Yeah, I remember though watching that, and there was a scene in that was very poignant, which was one of your allies passed during the filming, I believe. Was that not correct?
Yeah, that's correct, Michelle. You're gonna make me cry.
Yeah. But I'm sure there's still a lot of work to do. I know there's been an effort in the past to switch the jurisdiction from the EPA to maybe the Army Corps. And I was supportive of that, because during the Times Beach, I really didn't have my wife and I and others who were really close to working on the Times Beach waste had difficulty with Region 7. Could you just give us a little bit of a update on what's happened with who's actually watching this site? Is there a cleanup plan? Could you give us a little bit of a update on what's going on with that?
Yeah, so the Army Corps of Engineers, through their formerly utilized Sites Remedial Action Program, they handle all the radioactive waste from World War II scattered across the nation. And they really should be in charge of Westlake. But because of some wonky deals made by the DOE, that didn't happen. So EPA is the lead authority, and the Department of Energy is actually a responsible party. So when we say responsible party, that's one of the polluters at the site. So that are held responsible for the cleanup. So the government is one. So that's always fun. The right now we have a cleanup in place. We have a cleanup to remove 70% of the radioactivity on site. Obviously, that's not a 100% cleanup. That's kind of a pie in the sky number. But we also have a secondary cleanup plan. The groundwater at the site has now been formally listed as another Superfund site, which means that it will also go through the Superfund CERCLA process, and it will also get an investigation and eventually a cleanup. And we don't know what that will be, but through the groundwater, there is, the way it is written, it is possible that they will have to go and remove more radioactive waste. Does that make sense? So the approximate percentage is really a moving number.
Okay. So Dawn, could you tell our listeners what kind of waste? I mean, this waste, just not to put too fine of a point on it. This waste has a huge history. I mean, it was part of the Manhattan Project, right? It was the
Right.
first atomic bomb. There was material that was processed here in St. Louis, and it was put in Laddie Avenue, and now it's in Westlake. I believe Russell Bliss dumped some stuff into Westlake.
Oh yeah.
What? And I think that was some of the documents that we shared with you as well. I mean,
Oh, that was a
uh,
fun day, Steve.
yeah, I know. So there's all types of stuff in that landfill. But could you give us a rundown of what kind of radiation is there? I mean, you got uranium, but then uranium decays. So what kind of
Right.
radioactive isotopes are you guys dealing with? Actually, our region
Mm.
dealing with?
Right. So you're dealing with a lot of the, like you mentioned, the decay daughter products. Why they name them daughters? That's very interesting to me. But all of, if I like to think of it as the movie Gremlins. You throw water on them, and then they're even worse. You know, the daughter products, the decay products, namely thorium-230 at our landfill, uranium-238, uranium-235, polonium-210. Some of the most dangerous ones on the planet are located sitting on the surface of our landfill and have been moved throughout the St. Louis region, kind of like a hot potato. They've
Right.
sat at one site for a little while, and as soon as it became clear that really it had been allowed to contaminate other sites, so that wasn't the issue. The issue was people started finding out about it. Then they'd pick it up and move it a half a block away. Then they'd move it, maybe a mile and a half away. I mean, it literally, like, as soon as it became on people's radars, it was like, oh, time to pick it up and move it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's these little hodgepodge spots all across the region.
Right. I mean, and I believe I was reading at one point that one of the people who actually are the company that dumped it into Westlake. I mean, it was just sort of this, there was no federal oversight. It's just, it was known, this radioactivity was known. It was just sort of like, okay, what happened to it? Well, we dumped it in the landfill. And it was just crazy. And then it's dropping all the material down the highway too.
Now that's how I guess I interpret it as how Coldwater Creek got contaminated from I guess the dumping of these sites and then kind of the rain washing it into the creek.
That's exactly right. That's
Wow.
exactly right. Only 2 miles of that creek have been cleaned up, by the way. That is a 9-mile creek, and it has flooded many parks along that creek, many backyards. I mean, and to think that they have only scratched the tip of the iceberg. I mean, they're finding it in people's backyards, St. Ferdinand Park. And again, it hasn't. They haven't moved. And I think, and I know, I think Steve, you and Dr. Lisa have attended a few of those North County meetings. You know, they're sitting there and they're like, okay, so these houses are going to get their backyards checked, and we've already approached them and we've let them know. And then you have their neighbor directly next door. They just stop, right?
Right.
And if you Google Earth like we do, because we do our homework, you go home and you're like, where are these people? You're Googling, and your heart sinks because you look at that neighbor who has no idea, they're not notifying him, and my God, they got a swing set in their backyard and they got a
I know.
garden, and you're like, oh.
Yeah. So I mean, I think I remember at one point, and I think I'm accurate on this, but like with Coldwater Creek, they would say the contamination goes down so far, but they had stopped testing. It's like if you don't test, you don't find, and that's what we found a lot with the dioxin sites in the region. But so people have found radiation in their homes. Could you tell us a little bit about that? I mean, how did that happen? Who's brave enough to actually do testing? Doesn't that affect their property values? What's the status with that, with actual radiation being found in people's home?
So there are quite a few people that have found it in their homes by Westlake and Coldwater Creek, and these people have retained attorneys. Some of the homes, it's my understanding that at least one of them has already been remediated,
Okay.
that the responsible party came in and helped pay for that. And I think Steve brings up a good point. You know, that is where I think I'm so proud of the people in this community, because to look at what we've seen, to look at these documents and to say, you know what, yeah, I'm going to let my home be tested. That is such an act of bravery, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're trepidatious because that would affect their property value if they weren't able to get it remediated, but, they do that because of people like my friend Michelle in the film that were so brave to let someone come in and fill their last moments on earth, that, and like Jonas, the little boy, I think that their story touched these people. And I think these people are like, okay, no, it stops with me. At this point, we want to know the truth. And sometimes the truth is really scary and ugly, but we want to know it. We need to know it. If we don't know it, we can't fix it. And I think so if I'm most proud of anybody, it's people like Robin Daly. And then to let a film crew in and let them film you the moment you find out it's in your home. I mean, I cannot think of braver souls on this planet. I really can't.
So I'm curious, how did that get started? Because I think the story is a good one that needed to be told. And I really admire you and everyone for having that bravery to be able to be filmed like this. How did you all
we
get involved
didn't
with that?
know. As Steve will tell you, there's always been a lot of cameras around this issue. Some of them from people who want to film it to document what's happening. Some of it, the bad guys. Bad guys are always at a meeting. Their lawyers are always there with a camera and a recorder. So for us, and I think it was actually, Steve, I think it was Dr. Lisa. I think Dr. Lisa was one of the people that told us and said, girls, you're going to be okay. But everything you do, you have to do out in the open. This so much of this story has been hidden behind the scenes and is secret that the way to combat it is to live it in the open. Everything you find goes in, you put it online. Everything you find, you put it on Facebook. Every conversation, you talk about it. Nothing is, and she actually taught us too. And we stick with this. If I'm ever in a meeting with EPA, even we just met with the administrator, Andrew Wheeler, the other week, I always tell him, I'm like, so don't tell me anything that I can't tell somebody else, because not playing that game. I'm not going to sit in this room and we're not going to trade recipes. Whatever you say to me is going to go out there. And I feel like that's fair to them, right? But that's also, I'm not going to be that, oh, come here, girls, come behind. We got something, and then they try and make you feel special. Like, oh, look at you. And then before you realize it, you are part of the problem. You are part. They say, okay, we'll let you tell people, but you got to wait a few months. We're going to release this to the public. It's okay. No, bullshit. Sorry. No.
Yep.
No. Not playing that game.
Right. Getting co-opted. That happens so often with community organizations where they say, we'll meet with you, and then you get walled off from the rest of the group. So,
right. Your eyes.
So can I ask you, Dawn, what are the health studies around there? I mean, I've read different things. So, I mean, one of the important things you've done is shown the light on this, that it is here, it is happening. You've, the EPA and that, they've been kind of tight, holding the cards close to the vest. You're trying to open that up. Health studies in Coldwater Creek or around you, have there been any studies to show any epidemiological impacts from this that is reliable?
So there have been two. So there was an ATSDR and CDC health study done along Coldwater Creek that came to the conclusion that, yes, people could have been exposed and it could have caused cancer. Really, the specific one was breast cancer, lung cancer, and I think lymphoma or leukemia. It was one of those two. And then at Westlake, we had a health study done just on the emissions from the fire, just from the fumes from the fire, which said the same thing. Yes, people could have been harmed and could be harmed from inhaling this. We won't get a health study of the radioactive waste until probably after they're done cleaning what they can. Unfortunately, at our site, and this is the scary thing, there really isn't a whole lot known about the radioactive waste. We know what kind it is. We know the particle size. It's about 2 microns, which anything less than 10, you can respirate, you can breathe in. We know that there are these hot spots on the surface, but there hasn't been a detailed study done of where it's all at, and they're actually working on that. That's supposed to commence this fall. So we did win that battle, and really, it really sucks because I would say we won it, but we didn't. When they went to clean up, they hired a contractor, Parsons, to come in and do the work. And when Parsons took a look, they agreed with us. They turned around and looked at EPA and said, you want us to clean this, and we don't even have all the data we need. So we have to wait to see how bad this has been for us, in other words. That's right. That sucks, you know?
It does. And here's another thing that I'm interested in. And I know on your website, you have as the crow flies distance indicator. This is not just impacting your neighborhood. I mean, you have the worst of it. I mean, yeah. I think that is clear. I mean, you live right there, you can smell it, but people shouldn't just say it's Dawn Chapman's problem. I mean, I think, you know, this radioactive material gets airborne. It can go all over the place. Two things, Dawn. What are they telling you to do locally? And then also, I mean, I think it's like shelter in place, but shouldn't they be telling that to the entire region, shelter in place? I mean, what's your thoughts about that?
Well, I think that the wildfires out in California and Oregon and whatnot, you know how we've had that haze here. That has really opened up this conversation because it's shocking to people how far and how quickly particulates travel. And some of the particulates that are measured in the haze or the smoke from the wildfires, which are up in the atmosphere, are actually larger than our particulates at the site. So that the conversation you're mentioning right now, this whole what happens if the fire meets the waste, is the regional issue. It's absolutely a regional issue, and this is why, and this has really opened it up. What they're telling people is, should there ever be any incident at all at the site, regardless of if there's a release or the potential for a release, to sit tight. They want you inside. They want you, if you have plastic, to put it over your windows. You do not go to a low area with this stuff. Does that make sense? Because this is heavy and it will settle. You want to go interior, you want to go up and find a room, hopefully with no window. And that is where you sit until you're told otherwise. The problem is that, and you and I know, there's so many people are not aware that that is actually in place through St. Louis County. That should that ever happen, the very first place, it's my prediction, people will go is to the school to pick up their kids. Mm-hmm. And, you know, they're not going to be allowed to. The schools are going to have to do the same thing. And so no children are out, but then you've got parents standing outside. So it's very critical that this shelter in place thing, we've been really pushing St. Louis County hard to try and make this more public, because God forbid, should this ever happen, nobody knows about it. You know, you don't want people caught off guard. That's the worst thing we can have happen.
So your local fire department and EPA has told your neighborhood to shelter in place, right?
They have.
Do they have kits available to you?
They do. So just this past Thursday, there's 200 kits available. Now, obviously, that doesn't seem like a lot, but that was a grant and we're working on more. But the 200 kits were given to the families living within a mile of the landfill. And they were handed out this past Thursday, and then they're going to be handed out next week on Saturday morning. And those that cannot get out and get them, the fire department is going to go deliver them. But they're little red backpacks, and they have basic things like a tool to shut off your water and your gas, should you need it. They have thick sheeting for your windows. There is a NOAA weather radio, because that's how they will talk through Nixle. There is another battery radio. There's all kinds of first aid kits and whatnot. There's also a list of things in there that talk about for how many family members you have, what you need for how many days, for how many pets you have, what you need. So we were able to get that started, and that's a start. But there's a lot more than 200 people that live in the metro area.
I'll tell you what, Dawn, that sounds like 1950s on the beach, you know, Dr. Strangelove type stuff there. I mean, it's crazy. And then it's a mile radius. I mean, so what about 5 miles away?
That's right. Yeah.
What about 8 or 20? It's shocking to hear this. I mean, I'm glad they're doing it, but at the same time, it's really, I mean, if more people knew that they're handing out these kits for a radioactive event, I think people would be shocked.
I couldn't go with them. So Karen and I were invited to go to the firehouse because they had done, because of COVID, it was like a drive-through, show your ID, show your flyer, because they mailed them to everybody, and we'll just go put it in the back of your car, or, in your trunk or whatever. And they said, hey girls, I couldn't, like, it was triggering. Like, I literally, like, it would, I don't even know how to describe it, but kind of like what you said, like, it just, the reality of it just kind of hit me. And I was like, I can't do this, because we want to be hopeful, but you also want to be honest. And I was a mess. Like, I just felt it emotionally, like I was a mess. And I thought that seeing a line of people from my community lined up to get these backpacks because the federal government couldn't get its crap together, like, it was too much. And I was like, no, for emotional reasons, Karen and I just kind of stayed home and just, fought in a different way that night.
And even if you prepare people like this, it's probably only as good as the monitoring and detection there is. So could you talk a little bit about that? Like, is there a lot of trust in the community that the monitoring is going to be effective and quick enough to let people know?
Right.
And do they monitor just around the site, or are they monitoring in a wider region?
So before work, here's what we've asked for. We have not gotten this yet, but work has not started at the site. We have asked that before they start work, that they establish real-time and long-term monitors on the site. Some of these monitors, you do have real-time monitoring for this type of waste, but you also have particulate monitors that really, it takes you about a month, right? Because you have to get a sample, you have to watch it decay, but that's the most accurate monitoring that there is. So what we have asked is, before work begins, we want both. We want both on site, we want both off site in varying degrees from the site. And what that will do is that will establish what is occurring right now before work begins. Because that's important, because as you guys know, with Times Beach and whatnot, if you wait until stuff starts happening and then you take air monitoring, well, then what's normal? So we have to get that out of the way. But what that will let us do is we can then look at the long term, which is right. That's the most reliable, and then look at the short term, and then we'll be able to compare those and see, where's it lacking, and if we get enough of that, theoretically, it should make that real-time monitoring more reliable if we know the areas that it's deficient in. Does that make sense? So there's a lot of work. We've got some engineers from WashU. We've got an engineer from up in Oregon who went to WashU and graduated. So we have our team ready to go here to go over that data. And the other piece of this puzzle is the workers. We want the workers, preferred skilled labor, because they've been trained on how to do this. 513 would be our choice. They have their own air monitors, their own dosimeters. So that is kind of the third, that is almost about as independent as we can get. Does that make sense?
Yep,
so if we have that, then that the agencies aren't cooking the books, because so that's there's a bunch of pieces of that have to come together. But if that comes together, then yes, there will be confidence. If it doesn't, well, we're going to be screaming.
So do you
I think we need to just realize here that if it wasn't for the St. Louis moms, no one would know about this. None of this would be happening. I mean, I think it's great that people are getting kits. I don't think it's great that people are getting kits. They shouldn't be getting kits. We should have had a cleanup a long time ago. I mean, this waste should have never been just thrown around pell-mell. But Dawn, it's just, I listen to you talk. It's just like this language that you talk about, dosimeters, all this. I'm not saying moms shouldn't know such things. That's obviously not what I'm saying. But as a person who didn't train in this, and I don't know what your background was,
Not
Dawn.
this.
Did you have any scientific training in the
No,
past?
I was a musician, a violinist, and a
Okay,
pianist.
so yeah, let's not be all mommy, mom about this, but I'm just saying you came to this with a non-scientific background, and you just bought a home, or your family's living. You find this out, and now it's just so frustrating. I mean, I'm very, very impressed with your knowledge and your group's knowledge and what you've been able to do. But why in the hell have you had to do all of this and learn all of this? It seems as if we should have a government, an
Right.
EPA, a Department of Energy, health department, county health department, state. They were just absent without leave on this. They were just. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm glad you're doing this, but Dawn, I mean, what do you have to say to that? I mean, did you ever envision this for yourself? And has it
No.
been, what's the learning curve
It
here?
makes me really angry because I had dreams. I had things that I wanted to do with my life. You know, I- and I it's forced me in a direction that I never wanted to go in. And now that I'm in it, well, there's no way to get out of it, right? Because then there's the cleanup and you got to watch the workers and then you got to make sure. So for us, it's not even just about being in it and being drug in it. It's like, there's never going to be a time when we can get out of this. And obviously, as you know, there's no money to be made in this. There's nothing. It just costs money at this point because I don't work. This is a full-time job, but, and I think, when we talk about the movie Atomic Homefront, it was a phenomenal movie. But as Steve will tell you, we didn't even know it was going to be picked up by HBO. We didn't even know it would ever be a movie. This was just somebody that was recording it. And the only thing, we looked her up and we knew she had done some projects and whatnot. But the one thing she told us, and we promised her, she said, you know what? She said, this is a documentary. And so the key to a documentary is we're not here. You don't do things. And, there was a scene in there. My mom actually was at the Tivoli, Steve. It was the first time that my parents had seen the movie. And at one scene, I'm running out and my husband's bringing in Steak and Shake and my kitchen
yeah.
is a mess. And my mom leans forward and goes, you need to clean your kitchen. And I remember that day and it was crazy. And I did. I thought I'm going to get up and put makeup on. And I had to stop myself. I'm like, would I normally do this? And the truth is no. So, I mean, it's actually pretty invasive. I mean,
Well,
what we went through and we didn't know what it would turn out as. So that was, but I think she captured the truth. She captured the struggle. And that's the most important thing. And maybe Steve, that's what you're talking about. We struggle. We struggle to
well,
learn this stuff.
I mean, you didn't wake up one morning and say, I'm looking for a cause.
No.
It's put at your doorstep.
Yeah.
And you got radiation in your neighborhood. You have it in people's houses. No one told you about it.
Right.
And this, I mean, from my experience were decades ago. But I remember when the EPA came to where I was living and they said, we got to look in your house. And I'm like, for what? And they're in their respirator and their chem suits. And I said, what are you looking for? And they wouldn't tell me. And I had to get information on the news. I felt like and I got involved in that issue. And because it was brought to me, I wanted to find out what the health consequences, who was responsible. I mean, Dawn, I listened to you talk and I can tell that there's been a lot of hours put into this. And people, I'm sure, well, everyone needs to realize that, it was put on your doorstep and you wouldn't have had to have done all of this if our agencies and our government had done its job. So I commend you on that, but I know there's a lot of learning and a lot of, there's been a lot of growth in your own personal life, but it's not something that you sought out.
No.
I just, when I think about the people, I mean, there's it's just the lack of action. I mean, I know that you've gotten some action there, and I just, is there anything that people can do to help the moms going forward?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we still have a fire. What can people do to help you, Dawn?
So we have, I talked about that air monitoring. So we are putting a group together. And listen, I am a musician. If I can do this, anyone can do this. We can sit down and help you. It's actually very simple. It's numbers. Here's what's in the air. Here's what should be in the air. Here's what's in the air. This is what should not be in the air. I mean, so there's going to be some of that. And literally all that is going to be highlighting. Like any number that's above 40, do me a favor. Here, I'll provide a pink highlighter. Just highlight it for us. And, stuff like that. There is probably going to be a lot of letter writing. We have an election coming up November 3rd. And we don't know which way that'll go. And we could be looking at a whole nother EPA. And, that's terrifying because that means we got to go reestablish contacts, but it could also be a good thing. But we know that, when we wake up November 4th, our job's the same no matter what. We just push forward. And if we have new people, we work with them. But that we might need help with. We might need some letter writing, some email sent. One of the things that we really need help with is St. Louis County. I think we need to revisit this emergency shelter in place plan and just make sure people are aware it exists. You always hope it's like a tornado plan, right? Like an earthquake plan. You always hope you don't ever have to use them, but nobody benefits if they don't know it's there. So that is, and that's going to be maybe some phone calls to St. Louis County and people from different areas talking about how far they live from the landfill and what they might need. The other thing going forward is just really, really help with the workers. We want this waste cleaned up so badly, but I want it done safely. I don't want workers put at risk. And, if they are properly protected, this will go good. If they're not, then we're going to have a problem. And so we really we advocate on behalf of the community, right? But if you want to protect the community, you protect the workers. They're your first line of defense. If they are protected, so are we. And, so that's going to be a lot of conversations that we have.
Is there a website that's good for people to go to find one, to get a lot of information?
Yes. Oh, that's another thing. Yes. So we have justmomsstl.org, but if you go on there, it's a little outdated. We just wrote our first grant and got a grant in just a little to pay somebody to help us with our website because I don't know how to do that. So we're looking for somebody, that we can give some money to that they can just update it. Nothing crazy, just,
Where would they send those proposals to?
They can find us at westlakemoms@gmail.com. They can find us on Facebook on Westlake Landfill, but probably westlakemoms@gmail.com is the best place to reach us. But
and
yeah,
if people want to volunteer in other capacities or learn more, they can reach you there too, right?
That's right. That's a great way. And then, I think that there's so much to do here that even the simplest thing, like, my goodness, once a week, can you commit to 10 minutes looking over temperatures at the landfill? I'll actually, email you them so that it's just a screenshot. And all I need you to do is look for temperatures that are over this. I'll make it real easy for them. And even that is huge for us because then I can take that and take it to the fire department. And that's one less thing they have to do.
It's great information, Dawn. I think we can certainly help get the word out to those that are listening. And I'm sure somebody has heard something here where maybe they can help you all out. And I hope so. We can get the word out. But
I hope so.
I'm just truly inspired by you, Dawn, because, I didn't know who you were and I didn't even know anything about this site until I just happened to come across the documentary. But for everything that you've done and for the community, that means a lot, not only just for your family, but for people you probably didn't even know or didn't even know who you were. You've done a lot, and we need people like that in this world. We need people that care, that want to try to see things done right. And so I think you're an inspiration to people here in the region
Sweet.
And everyone who's seen your story.
I would tell the viewers too, it's a hard time right now, right, in the country, not just in St. Louis, but you feel like you see a lot of selfishness, you feel a lot of hopelessness. There are people that are sick and going to chemo treatments that are trying, there's nothing they can do for themselves, but they are looking over this and they're helping however they can to make sure it doesn't happen to somebody else. There's a real redeeming part of humanity that's happening right here in St. Louis that people don't see through this. The other thing I would encourage people to do is like Strucker. Please Google what's around you. If you are, yeah, we want you to know what's happening in our community in the region because this is a regional issue. But I also want you to kind of get online. It might be scary, but Google Superfund sites in your zip code. Just be aware that these are all over the place. And there could be one right around the corner from you, and you might not know that. That is one thing I wish I'd have known to look for that, nobody tells you when you're buying a house that, oh, hey, you ought to probably Google and make sure that there's not a toxic site around the corner. Because you assume, well, gee, they're not going to let me buy a house if there's lead paint in it, right? Without me knowing. So surely that's disclosed. I mean, but it's not. There's no law.
Actually, Joe, I believe that Wildwood City Council is considering an overlay district in where there would be required disclosure for sites that have been on Superfund list or are otherwise environmentally compromised. So I agree, Dawn. I think that's a great suggestion. I mean, I think I've always, even for people who believe, well, radiation isn't that bad. I don't know many of those people, but let's say radiation isn't that bad, or dioxin isn't that bad, or PCBs aren't that bad. People should have a right to know what they're getting themselves into. There's a right to know aspect, and I think we've really let our communities down. I mean, I could not imagine what it was like. I mean, I remember what it was like, with the Bliss stuff, but I couldn't imagine what it's like knowing that you're living next to what could be a radioactive fire. I mean, it's like a little Chernobyl in essence.
Yeah.
I mean, and for you to have to find that out as opposed to being told. So bravo to you for. I mean, now people know. Now people know. Let's hope. I think you're right, though. I think people need to know that there's still the potential for the fire meeting the radioactivity, and it's not just going to be a 1 mile radius concern. I mean, if God forbid, if I ever hear that happens, I mean, you have to realize that it's a huge event. We interviewed a Joe Mangano of the baby tooth study, and he talked about how radiation had moved over great distances. So, by the way, Dawn, could you give us did you work with maybe Kay Dry at all? One of those pioneer radioactive activists back in the day?
Kay, not, I've known Kay since 2013, since I found out about this. And even now with COVID, we Zoom at least once every 2 weeks. And boy, we call her our radioactive godmother. Because she is the godmother of this. She is somebody that has been relentless, and she's taught us science, but kind of like Lois and Dr. Lisa, she's also taught us what it's like to be a woman in this fight and how to balance it. She how to take care of ourselves emotionally in this fight, how to take care of ourselves physically. She is one of several people that I know will check in on us. Like, if it's been a rough week, she'll be like, all right, so what are you doing tomorrow? And I think that's why Kay Zooms with us, just to make sure we're doing okay and to give us that time where we're with her and not doing anything else and just laughing and having a good time. So Kay's a pioneer, but there's more to her than her documents. She's a ball of wisdom, and she just I think people like her are why we can still do this after 7, almost 8 years.
So you mentioned her documents. So a lot of people uninitiated about, she has a complete library. I mean, she's been working on issues regarding radioactivity for decades, maybe 40, 50 years. And I think she has the most exhaustive library out there. I'm sure that's what you're referring to, is the library that she has of her 50 years of research.
She holds all those documents, but she also, if you call her, be prepared, because you're going to go through a heck of a science lesson. I mean, she's like Lois in that. She doesn't just want you to know she has them. She wants you to understand them. And yeah.
Well, it's been an impressive conversation here. I'm just in awe, just hearing everything that you've been going through. And Steve, you can relate to it. You've been through this, obviously, with Times Beach.
You know what, Joe, I'm very impressed with the moms. I mean, I've watched it from the beginning, and there's a lot of tenacity there. It's something that I think could really crush a lot of people, knowing what they know. There'd be like, well, why don't we just sell? Let's not talk about this. Let's just sell and get out of here. Right. But I really appreciate the hard work. I've seen them use assets from pioneers in the region, people who've been involved in the environmental issues for decades, but you guys did it in your own inimitable way, and brought your own energy to it, and I know the fight isn't over, and if I just encourage people to visit your website. What is that one more time?
It's justmomsstl.org. And if I could just talk about, I really want these pioneers, it just occurred to me, Steve, I'm sitting on a laptop right now that your wife, Dr. Lisa Martino-Taylor, had a group of students raise money for. I literally am on a laptop that I have because of that. It just clicked with me. So, I mean, those pioneers, thank you for the shout out. But I'll tell you, I mean, standing on the shoulders of giants, there are a lot of people who have come before us that have helped lift us up. And that is but one example. I mean, I wouldn't have a laptop if it wasn't for Dr. Taylor. So.
Well, thank you, Dawn. But I'll tell you what ties us all together, I think, is this huge history of toxic waste in Missouri and St. Louis. And a lot of it's Defense Department, atomic bomb waste, waste from Agent Orange production. It's just, we have an interesting and unique history. So
don't you think that stands out, the history? Like, I just did an interview 2 weeks ago with Russell Kinsall, and we were outside of the landfill when they were kind of like marking and talking about areas that they were going to, where the digging would start. And he got choked up for a minute. Like he was standing there and we were talking and we had finished the interview, and he looked over and he just got real choked up. And he said, my God, that's like the history. That's the Fermi. That's the Fermi waste. That's the first cupful of nuclear waste right there. That's getting, it kind of got him. And I thought to I have felt that way for a while, but to watch that kind of come over him was kind of a moment for me.
Yeah, there's a huge Cold War history here, and thanks for shining the light on this part of it.
Thank you for having both of you.
Thank you so much, and we hope to have you back soon someday.
Anytime.
So give us an update.
Be my pleasure. Anytime.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Aphrodite, Bendis, Dionysus, Hera, Hermes, Icarus, Narcissus, Medusa, Ephesus, Ashalala, Cissus, Minerva, Ecopus, I love it when you couscous.